Well, the reason this work is so powerful is because it takes advantage of one of the basic organizing principles of life, something I like to call the universal principles of entrainment. Now, this term entrainment, of course, is not a very widely recognized one. Nonetheless, it has a huge impact on our health and our well-being and even our evolution as human beings. The term was coined by a noted physicist, Christian Higgins, in 1666 when he noticed that a pair of pendulum clocks left to their own devices would eventually synchronize to each other. And it's only recently that scientists have begun to even understand the principles that are responsible for this phenomenon. It turns out a condition inherent to nature that motivates the subtle exchange of vibrational information that's happening between the pendulums, such that the pendulums sort of communicate with each other until they find a harmonious and energy-efficient rhythm together and start entraining as one. And since Higgins' time, the principles of entrainment have been found to apply to any system in which vibrating, oscillating, or rhythmic cycles are present, not the least of which would be the cells, systems, and organs of our very own bodies, all being influenced by this universal force that's compelling the cells, systems, and organs of our bodies in the direction of a harmonious, energy-efficient relationship, greater wholeness, and oneness, if you will. Now, a research and education organization from California known as the Institute of Heart Math, they have identified a special sort of state that humans can fall into when the various oscillating systems of the body become entrained by the rhythm of the heart. And in this state, they say, according to the research, the body's systems function with greater efficiency and harmony, and the body's natural healing capacities are activated and amplified, and that tends to result in a whole slew of positive changes in health, wellness, and consciousness. Things like reduced stress, reduced anxiety and depression, decreased burnout and fatigue, enhanced immunity and hormonal balance, improved cognitive performance, and just a whole bunch of different health improvements that people experience. And furthermore, what the Institute of Heart Math has discovered is that the heart rhythm of a person in this special state can be detected or measured in the nervous system of another person when the two people are either just close to each other or touching, meaning that this special heart-entrained state and its benefits can be transferred directly from one person to the other through touch, like through the kind of work that we're doing here, or when they're just close to each other, like when people are on tables next to each other, like I have them here. So what I'm doing here is basically I'm just taking advantage of the fact that there's already a direct exchange of information happening between the cells, systems, and organs of your body. Already a direct exchange of information that is happening between people that is already nudging us toward greater health, greater wholeness, and greater conscious awareness. And I'm simply giving that exchange of information permission to happen. So let's say that life is this pond here, and each raindrop is a singular event, a person or an event that's sending out waves of influence into the pond that eventually run into other waves. And every time a wave interacts with another wave, it changes both waves. Those changed waves interact with other changed waves, and both are changed again. And eventually, all the waves have interacted and influenced each other. And at this point, they all share a common connection by way of the interactions and the changes that they have experienced, that they are experiencing now, and that they will experience in the future together. So the waves exist as individual waves on one level, but on another level they also exist as a continuous whole. And as each moment brings another change in one part of the pond, each moment simultaneously brings a change to the whole pond. And that's because the waves exist together as an ever-evolving whole now. So I'm using the analogy of the pond to say that as the pieces and parts of life interact and combine, life gets more complex on one hand because of the exponential increase in the number of connections and variety of relationships between the parts. But on the other hand, there's also a greater level of overall harmony when you look at the big picture because all of the parts also become more connected to the whole. And life just kind of likes things to be that way. And so there's a force that's kind of applying constant pressure, compelling things to come into relationship with each other and simultaneously also with the larger whole at the same time. So using the example of the entraining metronomes, that video I showed you in the last video, it's possible to sort of demonstrate and visualize this force and see it in real time and see how it's compelling the metronomes, which are seemingly separate objects, to come into a harmonious relationship with each other and with the whole system of metronomes. The mechanism that brings the waves in the pond and the metronomes into a harmonious relationship is known as entrainment. And this entrainment mechanism is also at work on the microscopic scale between the atoms that make up the molecules that make up everything in the material world, including the cells in your very own body. But entrainment also applies on the macroscopic scale as well, between you and the people in your life, between all the living things in the planet that we live on, between the planets and the sun, and so on and so forth. And entrainment also applies to the non-material world on the level of energy and consciousness and time. And so the truth is that everything in the universe is being compelled to connect and come into relationship with everything else through entrainment. So since the mechanism is entrainment and the effect is universal, it amounts to a fundamental organizing principle of life that I like to call the universal principles of entrainment. And I use that principle in my work. And if you can grok this concept and manage to see life through this lens, it changes everything. For instance, the trials and tribulations you've experienced in life and the symptoms you might be experiencing now on your own body take on a whole new meaning, and it opens up a whole new window of opportunity for healing. From a certain perspective, the problems we face in our bodies and lives have a lot to do with the unconscious conditioned resistance to the flow of life. It's kind of like we're standing still or trying to stand still in the strong current of a river, or in some cases we're even trying to walk upstream. And this requires an enormous amount of energy and resources to keep ourselves separate from the flow of life. Energy and resources that we don't get to use for recovering from injury, adapting to stress in our environment, healing, loving, and serving our fellow humans. In the same way that a river would kind of put pressure on your body if you were standing in it, the trials and tribulations and the symptoms we experience, they put pressure on us to kind of stop and turn and go with the flow of life. And so from this perspective, nothing is a mistake or a coincidence, not the experiences we've had in our lives, not the accidents, the injuries, not the pain or the disease, not the symptoms we're experiencing now. They all serve a purpose, that of guiding us towards our wholeness. In the words of Tony Robbins, life is not happening to you, it's happening for you. So if we're able to look at life through this lens, then the only thing that makes sense is to trust our experience, uncomfortable or otherwise, and trust that life is trying to show us something through our experience. And since all of our experiences are translated to us through our bodies, and especially through the sensations in our bodies, it's essential, if we want to move towards greater wholeness, that we turn towards those sensations and learn to allow them to be felt and experienced. And when we bring our attention to our experience in this way, we become anchored in the present moment. And the resistance I spoke of earlier lives in our body and body-mind, and it's sort of kept alive through our addiction to past traumas or our fear of the future. And so the resistance can't survive in the present moment. So when we're anchored in the present moment, the conditioned habitual resistance to the flow of life kind of starts to loosen its grip. And when the resistance softens, we're able then to sort of allow the river of life, aka the universal principles of entrainment, to sort of sweep us in the direction of our wholeness again. And if you make a regular practice of bringing your attention to your body, over time your experience will prove to you that life's trials and tribulations and the symptoms that you experience they're not a mistake. They're a doorway to your wholeness. And ultimately, life is trying to show you that it's holding you. And so the work that I'm doing here at the Network Life Center is aimed at creating deep safety and ease in your nervous system so that your attention can rest in your body, so that that resistance does soften, and so then that the universal principles of entrainment can sort of sweep you towards your wholeness and towards greater trust in life. And the way that I do that is in a way I'm kind of like surfing the flow of life, or the force of wave of the universal principles of entrainment myself. And I'm inviting the nervous system of the person I'm working with to come along for the ride by letting their system entrain to mine. And so what I do is I simply bring as much presence to the present moment as I can by letting my attention rest in my body and including everything that I find there as fully as possible. And then I include the person that I'm working with by letting my eyes rest on them. And immediately as I do that, I'm able to sort of feel the flow of the river of chi that is shared by both my body and theirs. And I can also feel where the boulders of resistance might be placed in that river. And so these sensations kind of guide me to bring my hands somewhere on or over the body of the person I'm working with. And when I've touched the right place with the right amount of force in the right direction, I can feel those boulders start to resolve, and as they sort of melt back into the river of chi. And it's immediately apparent that there's a resolution. The person I'm working with As their breath changes, they reposition themselves, the tension in their system changes, there's an emotional release, they report feeling something shift, etc. And so that's some of the short-term stuff, but long-term, there's a measurable, reproducible, and predictable increase in range and depth of breath, a decrease in the overall tension in a person's body, a permanent change in their posture, a constructive shift in their perceptions of themselves and the world around them, an increased ability to adapt to stress, enhanced and refined body-mind awareness, a heightened sensitivity to their internal rhythms and the rhythms of their environment, an increased range and depth of emotional expression, and the most important thing, I'd say, a greater awareness of their gifts and a greater capacity to share those gifts with others. So these long-term changes have been reported in research that's been done by Donald Epstein, the creator of network spinal analysis, and that's kind of the technique in the world that my work is born of. But I like to refer to some research that's done by an organization known as the Institute of Heart Math, the language and outcomes of which seem to be a better match to the work that I do. Their research shows that when a person brings their attention to their body, a special system-wide coherent state develops in that person's nervous system, whereby the various cyclical systems in the body, they start to synchronize and entrain to each other. And as a result of this, the research also shows that there are benefits to health and wellness and shifts in consciousness that happen as a result of residing in that state. And those are very similar to what I've observed in the work that I'm doing. And furthermore, what's really cool, their research demonstrates how this coherent state and its benefits can be actually transferred directly from the nervous system of one person or people to the nervous system of another person or a group of people via the information exchange that happens between their overlapping and entraining biofields. And this happens whether they're touching or not, again, which seems to explain the mechanism behind the work that I do. So when I'm working with folks here together, we're kind of creating a little oasis where the dominant pattern generator is one of connecting with resource in the system and reorganizing the system based on that sort of open-ended resource, which could also be called love, basically. So as opposed to what we're sort of generally entraining to in the outside world, which is something that says that the best strategy for living is to create some armor to separate ourselves from others and protect what we have, because it's not likely that there's going to be any more of that where that came from.